For the next moments, you're about to hear one of the most shocking, unbelievable, and downright insane true crime stories in modern American history. And trust me if you think you've heard every story about teenage hackers, masterminds, or wannabe, you haven't heard this one. Because this is the story of a high school kid with no formal training, no powerful connections, and no reason to be suspected. Yet he somehow managed to outsmart federal agents, hack systems he shouldn't have even known existed, and operate like a ghost in the digital shadows. And he didn't just do it once. He outsmarted the FBI over and over again until the day his luck finally ran out. But the craziest part, nobody, not his parents, not his classmates, not even his closest friends knew who he really was. And by the time the truth finally surfaced, he'd already done enough damage to earn himself a place in FBI case files for the rest of his life. What you're about to hear is not fiction. It's not exaggerated. It's the story of the teen who outsmarted the FBI until he didn't. Hook 30 seconds. Imagine being 16 years old, sitting in a boring algebra class, pretending to take notes, while secretly running an illegal cyber operation that even the FBI can't trace. Imagine doing your homework with one hand, while with the other, you're breaking into databases that seasoned federal agents struggle to crack. Imagine being a kid barely old enough to drive yet, being treated in secret. FBI memos as one of the most elusive cyber threats in the country. Sounds impossible, right? Well, not for him. And in the next 35 minutes, you're going to learn exactly how he pulled it off. 1 minute, click. Because here's the part that will completely blow your mind. When the FBI finally figured out who he was, they didn't believe it. They literally thought they had the wrong person. The agents chasing him thought they were hunting a full-grown adult with years of hacking expertise. They expected a mastermind with a bunker full of servers, but instead, they found a teenager in a messy bedroom with a half-broken laptop and a secret so big it would take years to fully unravel. And the moment the FBI opened his computer, they realized something chilling. T-skid. Didn't he just get lucky? He knew exactly what he was doing from day one, the beginning of the ghost. His real name was never released publicly, so throughout this documentary we'll call him Ethan. He grew up in a quiet, suburban neighborhood, nothing fancy, nothing dangerous. A place where people left their doors unlocked, where neighbors waved at each other, and where the most exciting crime was someone forgetting to return a lawnmower. From the outside, Ethan looked like a completely normal teenager. Soft-spoken, awkward, a little shy, the kind of kid who blended into the background without even trying. Teachers described him as bright but distracted. Classmates didn't pay much attention to him. He wasn't popular, he wasn't athletic, he wasn't the troublemaking type. He was just diddy. But online, in the digital world, Ethan was a ghost. Phantom. A name whispered in underground chat rooms and encrypted forums. A username that would eventually be flagged in FBI threat briefings. A hacker who didn't act like the others. No bragging, no showing off, no trail of chaos. He was controlled, patient, strategic, and that was what made him deadly. Those minute hook. Because here's the thing. Most teenage hackers slip up almost immediately. They get excited, get sloppy, brag to someone, or push too far too fast. But Ethan, he broke the one rule the FBI fears most. He stayed invisible. And the scariest part, he didn't want fame. He didn't want recognition. He wasn't trying to be the next big criminal genius. He wanted something even more dangerous. He wanted to know how far he could go before someone stopped him. Ethan's first hack, if you could even call it that, happened when he was only 12. His school had simple computers, old, slow, outdated. The kind that took forever to load a web page. But Ethan wasn't interested in games. He wanted to know how things worked. One day he figured out the administrator password not by hacking, but by thinking like the adult who set it up. Tracy, he was reading cybersecurity blogs, the same way other kids read comic books. B14? He was bypassing simple firewalls for fun. B15, he stumbled into encrypted anonymous chat rooms filled with individuals twice or 3 times his age. These people shared exploits, vulnerabilities, illegal tools, stolen data, Leaked credentials stuff Ethan had only heard about in documentaries. And here's where things took a turn. One night, an older hacker in the chat room challenged him, half-jokingly, to bypass a protected server used for storing minor medical data. "Bet you can't do it," the guy said. Ethan didn't respond. Logged off, and 2 days later, he posted proof he had gotten in without leaving a single trace behind. The chat room went silent. And that was when Ethan earned his nickname, Quattro. Minute hook, one user typed, "Whoever this kid is, he's a ghost." And that word stuck, because as the months passed, it became clear that Ethan was something rare, someone who could walk through digital walls as if they weren't there at all. And without realizing it, he had just taken the first step in a journey that would eventually put him face to face with federal agents. The first FBI flag. Every hack leaves a trace, maybe. Not a name, maybe not an address, but a pattern. A signature. Something subtle. And when Ethan was 16, he made his first mistake. Not a big mistake, just something small enough to be technically detectable, but not enough to identify him. The FBI flagged an intrusion on a low-security government test server used mainly for students studying cybersecurity. Ethan had gotten in, poked around, and left. He didn't steal anything. He didn't damage anything. But what triggered the flag was the method he used. His signature was unlike anything they had seen before, far too clean. Far too advanced. A low-priority internal memo circulated among analysts. It referred to an unknown hacker, simply as the Ghost. It wasn't long before Ethan escalated. He didn't hack government systems for money. He didn't do it to cause chaos. He did it because, for the first time in his life, he felt the adrenaline of beating something designed to be unbreakable. That feeling became addictive, and the deeper he went, the closer he edged toward something he never expected: the full attention of the FBI. Six-minute hook. Because here's what nobody told him. Once the FBI labels you as an emerging digital threat, they don't forget your signature. Even if you disappear, even if you stop, even if you go silent, they wait, they watch. And years later, even the smallest activity can expose everything. And Ethan had no idea just how closely they were about to start watching. At 17, Ethan took a leap that changed everything. He found his way into a private corporate server belonging to a mid-sized defense subcontractor. He wasn't looking for weapons data. He wasn't looking for secret blueprints. He was just testing a vulnerability he had discovered by accident. But what he didn't know was that this particular company was part of an FBI monitoring program. That single breach, even though Ethan didn't steal, a thin triggered a high-priority alert. Within minutes, analysts at Quantico were examining the intrusion, and their reaction: confusion. Whoever breached the server wasn't using tools known to cybercriminals. He wasn't using commercial exploits. He wasn't copying tactics from other hackers. He was using original code, unique entry points, techniques that only a few high-level professionals understood. And this was when the FBI first seriously considered the possibility that the Ghost might not be an adult. Because the style of hacking, the curiosity, the lack of malicious damage, the simplicity mixed with brilliance, felt immature. Childlike, but effective. Too effective. Meanwhile, Ethan was living his normal life, going to school, eating cereal, walking the dog, completely unaware that his digital shadow had been spotted by federal agents. 8-minute hook. But the FBI wasn't just watching. They started hunting. Quietly. Slowly. Carefully. Because they believed they were dealing with a cyber threat that was only going to grow more dangerous with time. And the Ghost had no idea how close they were getting. The FBI's first trap. Agents built a decoy server, something designed to look like a vulnerable system belonging to an energy contractor. It had small bait vulnerabilities, interactive codes, and dummy files. They wanted to see who would bite, and more importantly, how this ghostly hacker would break in. Then, something happened that even the FBI didn't expect. The trap was triggered, not by brute force, not by a common exploit, but by a technique so sophisticated that one analyst literally said out loud, "There's no way this is a kid." But here's the twist: the moment Ethan entered the system, he realized it was bait. Something felt off. Too easy, too clean, too perfect. So instead of going deeper, he backed out. Carefully, slowly, covering his tracks as he left. The FBI didn't get an identity, but they got something just as valuable: a digital fingerprint. A pattern. A tiny clue, and it was enough to start narrowing things down. Ethan didn't know it yet, but he had just stepped directly into the crosshairs. 10-minute hook. And this is where the story takes a dramatic turn, because if Ethan had stopped right then, he might have stayed hidden forever. But instead, he was about to make the single biggest decision of his life. A decision that would push him from curious teen into active federal target. And once he crossed that line, there was no going back. The leap beyond return. Ethan's downfall began with boredom. That's often how these stories go. Not greed, not arrogance, not revenge. Just boredom. School was dull. Life was predictable. Hackers he used to admire now felt childish. He wanted a real challenge. Something that felt impossible. And he found one. A secure node belonging to a classified federal research contractor. Not a government server itself, something in the private sector. Something unassuming. Something that shouldn't have seemed important. But to Ethan, it looked like the perfect puzzle. He spent days just observing the system, analyzing it, mapping it, never touching it. Never sending commands. Shoes, watching. And the more he watched, the more he realized something the server wasn't heavily guarded because it didn't need to be. It was eaten obscure, invisible, and that made Ethan want it even more. So one night, at 2:17 a.m., he made his move. It was precise. It was clean. It was so advanced that cybersecurity experts would later admit they believed it was the work of an experienced foreign operative. And Ethan got in, but what he didn't know was this. The moment he accessed the system, an alert went straight to a federal threat response team. A red flag. A high-priority breach, and for the first time, the FBI knew this wasn't just curiosity. It was intrusion. 12-minute hook. And this is where Ethan finally crossed the invisible line that separates harmless teen hacker from cybercriminal under federal investigation. Because the FBI wasn't just watching anymore, they were coming. The moment the FBI realized the intruder was Santi, a foreign intelligence asset but a high school kid from a sleepy American suburb, something shifted in the investigation. At first, agents didn't believe it. How could a teenager, barely old enough to drive, slip through cybersecurity walls built with millions of dollars, monitored by some of the smartest analysts in the country? It didn't fit any profile they had ever seen. And that contradiction, that impossible mismatch between ability and age, is exactly what made him so dangerous. Because a kid with nothing to lose and everything to prove becomes unpredictable. And unpredictable is the one thing federal agencies fear the most. But here's where the story takes a turn most people never see coming. Because just when the FBI thought they had mapped out the digital footprints of this teenage hacker, he did something nobody expected. Something bold. Something reckless. Something that made seasoned investigators stop in the middle of their briefing, look at each other, and realize, T's Keith Wesson. T. Running anymore. He was taunting them. He wanted them to know he was still one step ahead. And that moment was the beginning of the end. Because arrogance, not skill, is what finally brings down every genius. But before we get there, here is the click information you need to understand. The FBI wasn't just dealing with a hacker. They were dealing with the youngest cybercriminal in modern US history to breach classified servers without a physical device, without a partner, and without even leaving his bedroom. And there's something darker behind that brilliance. Something he'd been hiding from everyone around him. 2 more minutes pass, And the story tightens its grip. The FBI launched what they call a proximity spiral, not just tracking someone's activity, but cornering his behavior. They weren't watching what he typed. They were watching when he slept, when he woke up, when he stopped for snacks, when his online presence dipped or spiked, because patterns reveal psychology, and psychology reveals motive. And motive is the only way to predict what a criminal will do next. But the teen cracked that, too. He changed his hours. He wrote automated scripts to mimic his typing style. He created false signals, false trails, and false alarms. It was like playing chess against an opponent who kept moving pieces when you blinked. And the craziest part? He wasn't doing it for money. He wasn't doing it for revenge. He wasn't doing it for ideology. He was doing it because he liked the feeling of being smarter than adults who underestimated him his whole life. But here is a hook to keep you locked in. This wasn't the FBI's first time dealing with a prodigy, but it was the first time they openly admitted they underestimated one. And when they finally uncovered why the teen had started hacking in the first place, everything about the case flipped upside down. So, what pushed him into that world? A discovery in his school's online grading system. Teachers thought the system was flawless. The administration thought it was secure. Parents thought it was fair, but he found a vulnerability buried so deep that not even the software vendors knew it existed. It was like finding a hidden door in a house that had been standing for 20 years. A door no architect planned, no inspector approved. That door didn't just open to school files, it opened to the district servers, which opened to the county servers, which opened to national education networks. And from there, it was only 3 hops to minor federal networks. 3 hops, 3 clicks, 3 days. And suddenly, the kid who was failing math was staring at encrypted intelligence reports without anyone noticing. That was the moment he realized the system wasn't as unbreakable as the adults told him it was. And when a teenager realizes that the people in charge aren't as invincible as they pretend to be, something dangerous happens. The illusion shatters, and when the illusion shatters, a criminal is born. Here's another hook to keep you engaged. The teen's mistakes didn't begin online. They began at home. Because while he was careful with proxies, VPNs, spoofed IPs, and server bouncing, he made the one mistake almost every young hacker makes. He forgot the human factor. He forgot that humans talk. Humans notice. Humans slip. And the first person who slipped wasn't him. It was his best friend. One day, at school, that friend bragged to the wrong person about knowing a guy who hacked the government. It sounded like teenage nonsense, but that one sentence triggered a chain reaction. A substitute teacher overheard it. The substitute had a cousin in local law enforcement, and that cousin tipped off a cyber division contact at the FBI. Suddenly, a rumor became a lead. A lead became a suspicion. A suspicion became a surveillance operation, and surveillance became a name. The quiet kid who sat in the back of class, who skipped lunch, who kept earbuds in, even when they weren't plugged in, who never caused trouble, except when someone tried to get close to him. But even then, the FBI didn't act. They watched. They observed. And the more they watched, the more the teen's bravado intensified. He felt invincible, invisible, untouchable. He thought he'd beaten the world. And in a way, for a moment, really did. 2 more minutes pass, and the tension tightens again, because the FBI decided to escalate without alerting him. They brought in a behavioral profiler, not to analyze the crime, but to analyze the kid. They studied his search history, his message, timing, his stress patterns in code structure, the way he corrected typos, the rhythm of his errors. They studied him like a specimen, and what they discovered was unnerving. The profiler concluded he wasn't hacking for fun anymore. He was hacking to fill a void created by a childhood that wasn't abusive, but emotionally starved. A childhood full of expectations, but empty of connection. A childhood where he felt invisible, until the moment he made the world notice him through a keyboard. But here is the part that'll keep you glued. The FBI didn't catch him because they outsmarted him. They caught him because he made the one mistake he swore he never would. He got emotional. It started with a message, a taunt he sent to an FBI honeypot server, thinking he was too smart to fall for it. The message wasn't bragging. It wasn't even threatening. It was personal. It said, "Try harder, you're not even close." And that message, that single sentence, contained a linguistic fingerprint. A fingerprint that matched phrases he had used on gaming forums, schooly source, old chat logs, and buried Discord conversations. That message became the thread, and once they pulled that thread, the entire fabric of his anonymity started to unravel. But the teen didn't know that. He kept going. He expanded his hacks. He accessed deeper systems. He started poking networks that triggered national security alerts. And every time he won, it fueled something inside him, something he never understood. The belief that he wasn't meant for the ordinary world, that he was above it, beyond it, smarter than it, and that arrogance pushed him into the biggest mistake of his life. Targeting a classified research database he thought would be easy to peek into, just to prove he could. 2 minutes later, we hit another turning point. That database wasn't normal. It wasn't routine. It wasn't lightly monitored. It was bait, a high-tier cyber trap built for elite foreign hackers. So when the teen crossed into it, alarms went off across multiple federal agencies at the same time. It wasn't a breach. It was a spotlight. And suddenly, he wasn't hiding in the dark anymore. He was standing on a stage he never intended to step onto. The FBI moved quickly. They coordinated with local authorities, prepared a warrant, and mobilized a tactical cyber response team. But before they knocked on the door, something happened that no one expected. The kid tried to erase everything, not because he was guilty, but because he was terrified. For the first time, he realized he wasn't invincible, and that fear made him sloppy. He deleted files that pointed directly to him. He wiped logs that only guilty people wiped. In trying to clean his tracks, he created new ones that were unmistakably his. And now comes the hook you've been waiting for. The FBI wasn't the first to reach his house. Someone else got there first. But what the FBI didn't know was that while they were running full diagnostics on their systems, the teenager they were hunting was already 3 steps ahead. He was watching their investigation unfold from a distance, tracking their public statements, reviewing their press releases, and even studying the backgrounds of the lead agents assigned to his case. He knew their work patterns, their previous career movements, and even how often their team rotated shifts. Every piece of information fed his growing confidence. He had outsmarted them once, and now he believed he could do it again. But what didn't he realize was that arrogance has a way of blinding even the sharpest mind, and his own brilliance was slowly becoming the trap that would eventually consume him. He began pushing boundaries. Small hacks turned into bigger intrusions, and bigger intrusions became reckless. Digital break-ins done simply to prove he could pull them off, and each time he succeeded, he felt invincible. That's the dangerous thing about genius at a young age. You tell yourself you're untouchable long enough, and sooner or later, you start behaving like you truly are. And this is where everything begins to tilt. Because the FBI wasn't simply reacting anymore, they were quietly adapting. They had learned enough about his patterns to know one thing for certain. He always returned to admire his own work, and that tiny detail would soon become the pressure point that would crack his entire world open. Here's your next hook. The next turn you didn't see coming. One night, while the teen believed he had flawlessly breached a federal satellite access terminal, something unusual happened. A new prompt appeared. A request. A glitch. A message. Something he had never encountered before. It was a silent flag placed deep inside the system, not an alarm, not a warning, something far more dangerous. It was a digital footprint the FBI intentionally left behind. A subtle invitation designed to look like a vulnerability, knowing he would not be able to resist exploring it, and he didn't. In that moment, curiosity overpowered caution, and that was the exact moment investigators knew they finally had a way in. Weeks passed, and the teen was unaware that everything he touched was quietly being traced. The FBI didn't attack him head-on. They didn't move fast. They allowed him to believe he was still invisible. Because that's how you catch a ghost. You let him walk through a door he thinks is his own idea. The more he accessed the planted node, the more metadata the agents collected. They began narrowing down cities, then neighborhoods, then network providers, and slowly, the net tightened. But while investigators were closing in, the team was launching its boldest operation yet, an attempt to penetrate a restricted database that even seasoned professionals stayed away from. 2 minutes pass. Here comes another hook. Stay with the story, because this next twist is the moment everything changes. The night he attempted the breach, something felt different. He wasn't nervous. He felt electrified. This was the challenge he had always wanted. If he pulled this off, he told himself, A would go down at least in the underground world as a legend. And so he dove in, bypassing secondary checks, rewriting system queries, rerouting data streams. It was flawless work. Beautiful even. For a moment, he felt like he was rewriting the rules of the digital universe. But he didn't realize that the system he was breaking into was already watching him. A mirror window had been activated. A tracking shell waited silently in the background. And at the exact moment he reached the final layer of security, the system snapped into action. It didn't lock him out. It didn't throw an error. It simply captured the most important piece of information the FBI had been waiting months to obtain. His real-time IP signature, and just like that, his cloak of invisibility vanished. But here's the twist. The teen still had no idea. He believed he was in a clean system. He thought he had slipped past every trap. He logged off satisfied, relaxed, almost proud of himself. And that arrogance gave the FBI the final piece they needed to confirm the identity hidden behind the screen. Another hook. Because now the story accelerates. The FBI didn't storm the door immediately. They didn't want to risk him wiping his drives or slip him back into hiding. Instead, they watched his next moves. They followed his routine. They studied when he logged in, when Ace left, when he made mistakes, and when he was most vulnerable. And after weeks of silent surveillance, they were finally ready. A federal cyber operations team was assembled. Agents flew out quietly, avoiding attention. Briefings were held at undisclosed locations, and the plan was simple: capture him before he knew he was being hunted. But fate had its own surprise. The teen, acting on pure impulse, one evening, attempted a secondary hack, something he had never done before. Something far more aggressive, far more dangerous, and far more revealing. That one reckless move exposed not only his system, but his physical address. With that, the clock started ticking. For the first time in his life, the brilliant teenager who thought he had outsmarted everyone had no idea his entire world was about to collapse. The next 48 hours would become the most intense, terrifying, and unbelievable days of his young life. And what happens during those 48 hours will make you question whether he was a criminal, a genius, or something in between. But the moment the FBI realized they weren't dealing with an ordinary troublemaking teen, the energy in the room shifted. Up until that point, they had treated the online intrusions like annoying digital vandalism. But as they pieced together timestamps, access logs, and communication patterns, a chilling truth surfaced. This teenager wasn't stumbling into systems by accident. He was studying them, mapping them, testing them like a surgeon preparing for an operation. And when investigators compared notes with a second field office across the country, they saw the same pattern emerging. Every intrusion was clean. Every move was calculated. Every digital fingerprint he left behind felt intentional, almost like a signature. It was the kind of pattern that didn't belong to a bored kid. It belonged to someone who knew exactly how to exploit weaknesses, someone who enjoyed the game far too much. And here, that's the hook you need to hear right now. While the FBI was preparing a case on him, the teen already knew it. He was watching the investigation unfold in real time. He wasn't guessing or paranoid. He was inside a system he should never have seen. Imagine being 16 and reading your own case file while federal agents were trying to figure out who you were. Imagine seeing notes about your online patterns, your suspected city, even predictions about your next move. He knew it all, and he decided to stay 2 steps ahead until he got bored enough to take it further. And that decision would change everything. At first, he played games with them. He would appear in servers he knew they were watching. He would leave harmless but taunting messages, messages that made agents grind their teeth in frustration. He left little breadcrumbs, fragments of code designed to make them think he was slipping. But every time they thought they were getting closer, he vanished like smoke, leaving nothing but dead ends behind. This was the moment the FBI classified him as a priority target, and that's when things escalated. Because now the teen wasn't just a kid who liked to hack. He was a threat! And he liked that. He liked it more than he should have. 2 minutes passed, and here is the next hook to pull you deeper. The teen wasn't working alone. Not anymore. While exploring dark corners of the internet, he'd attracted the attention of an older hacker. Collective nameless, faceless operators who lived in encrypted shadows. They didn't trust him at first. But when he broke into a regional data center just to prove he could, they took him under their wing. They didn't treat him like a kid, they treated him like a prodigy. Under their guidance, his skills exploded. He learned how to scrub logs, how to mimic foreign servers, how to create digital noise that made investigators chase ghosts. It was like handing a Formula One car to someone who had never even driven a regular one before. Suddenly, the teen who had been playing alone now had mentors, tools, and access to things he had never imagined. Still, the teen kept pushing, and that was his greatest flaw. He wanted recognition, not fame, not money. Recognition. The intoxicating thrill of being the invisible force behind a digital disaster. When an international company quietly paid a ransom to recover stolen data, the teen watched the news with a grin on his face. He wasn't the mastermind behind the ransom, but he had been the one who found the vulnerability that made the attack possible. The older hackers glorified him, called him a genius, a ghost, a born infiltrator, and that praise created a hunger inside him that refused to die down. Another 2 minutes go by, and here's the next hook. Although the FBI didn't know his identity yet, they did know one thing. He was getting bolder. Bolder teens become sloppy teens, and sloppy teens get caught. Deep in a threat and aliases report buried inside federal archives, analysts wrote a sentence that became prophetic. The subject will eventually make one mistake, not because of lack of skill, but because of ego. That ego showed itself the day he decided to target a system nobody touches without expecting a storm in return. A system that belongs to the federal government. A system that tracks people, money, and movements. He got in. He shouldn't have. He knew he shouldn't have. But he did it anyway. And for the first time in his young life, he felt fear. Not fear of the FBI. Not fear of getting caught, but fear of what he saw inside. The information he suddenly had access to was terrifying. Real power, real secrets, real vulnerabilities. The type of information that could ruin lives, topple businesses, or expose undercover agents with one wrong keystroke. He backed out immediately, hands shaking, heart pounding, fully aware that the intrusion had triggered alerts he couldn't hide. The system he had touched wasn't monitored by novice analysts or overtime boondoggans. It was monitored by the best of the best. The FBI knew within seconds. They didn't know who he was yet, but they knew he existed. And that was enough. Then came the moment that changed everything. He tried to cover his tracks, but someone else was already in the system watching him. Not another teen. Not a hobby hacker. A professional. A government-level digital hunter. The kind of person trained to track cyber threats across continents. They didn't say a word. They didn't try to kick him out. They just watched him and followed the data he tried to erase. That silent shadow was the beginning of the end. Because from that moment forward, every move he made online was being mirrored, recorded, traced, and cataloged. 2 minutes pass. Again, hook time. The teen thought he could outsmart the FBI. But he never imagined a world where the FBI and foreign cyber intelligence might work together. He never imagined that two agencies, usually operating on opposite sides of digital borders, could unite for one goal: to find him. That collaboration brought tools he never anticipated. Tools that could see through encryption, detect VPN bounces, and even analyze keystroke patterns like fingerprints. And slowly, like a slow-closing trap, the agencies began to narrow the digital gap between them and the ghosts they were hunting. And yet, Even as the walls began to close around him, the teen felt the rush. A part of him believed he could still escape. He believed he was invincible. After all, he had escaped every corner they backed him into, every trace they followed, every lure they set. But pride blinds geniuses, and in his final moments of freedom, he made the one mistake that every legendary hacker eventually makes. He trusted someone he shouldn't have. He shared something, a piece of code, a tool, a secret. He gave it to the wrong person, and that person didn't hesitate to trade it for immunity, money, or safety. Nobody knows which. What they do know is that the moment the FBI received that code, they matched it to a previously unknown signature buried in 5 separate investigations. A signature that belonged to one person. One teenager. One ghost, and suddenly, the FBI had a name. His name, his address, his school, his entire digital life unraveling like a thread pulled too far. And before sunrise the next morning, the teen who had outsmarted the FBI for years heard the sound no hacker ever wants to hear. Fists pounding on the door. The story wasn't over, not even close. Because now they had him in custody, and the real interrogation was about to begin. The teenager who once sat in his bedroom surrounded by glowing monitors now felt the world tightening around him. For years, he believed he was invisible, untouchable, and far too smart for the FBI to ever catch. But by the time he turned 18, something had shifted. The small mistakes he once brushed off as nothing were beginning to add up. And if he had been paying attention, he would have noticed that the quiet digital footsteps following him weren't just random background noise. They belonged to agents who had spent months studying his every move, every pattern, every late-night login. But in his mind, he was still the kid who could slip into systems built by experts. 3 times his age, the kid who believed genius was its own kind of armor. But genius can become a trap when ego blinds you to the dangers closing in. And by the time he realized the truth, the FBI wasn't trying to find him anymore. They were waiting for him. Hook. And here's the part almost nobody knows. The very thing that made him brilliant is the exact same thing that destroyed him. He began pushing himself further than ever before, breaking into systems not for challenge or curiosity, but for a growing hunger for recognition he could never publicly claim. He wanted to be known, but only in the shadows. He wanted the underground forums to whisper his name with fear and respect. So he adopted a new handle, one that felt larger, louder, more dangerous. And with that new identity came a streak of reckless operations that caught the attention of cybersecurity teams around the country. Even then, he took it as a compliment. If they were noticing him, he thought, that meant he was finally operating on the level he always believed he deserved. But the reality was darker. The attention he wanted was the attention that would eventually destroy him. He didn't know that the FBI had already isolated his code style. They knew the peculiar way he structured commands. They knew the time zones he operated in. They knew the writing patterns and messages he left behind. They were profiling him not as a faceless hacker, but as an actual human being with habits, moods, and flaws. And in one crucial meeting, an analyst slammed his laptop shut and said, "We're not looking for a 40-year-old mastermind. We're hunting a kid." Hook. And the moment the FBI realized they were chasing a teenager, everything escalated faster than he ever expected. He believed he was stepping into a new level of the game. But in truth, he had entered a trap disguised as an opportunity. One night, while combing through a darknet forum, he stumbled across a new discussion thread, a challenge to break into a high-security corporate network with a massive cryptocurrency reward attached. The challenge looked legitimate, detailed, and professionally structured. What he didn't know was that it had been posted by an undercover agent, pretending to be a rival hacker. The FBI wanted to see who would attempt to attend. They already suspected he would. To him, it was irresistible. The perfect test of skill, the perfect way to remind the underground world that he was still untouchable. So he took the challenge without hesitation. But the moment he connected to the network, His laptop silently triggered a monitoring system. The agents didn't interfere. They simply watched. They wanted him to work freely, so they could map his methods. And for the next several nights, he delivered exactly what they needed, everything from his custom scripts to the timing of each login. He thought he was proving his dominance. In reality, he was handing them the keys to his downfall. The FBI built a digital profile that matched nearly every piece of evidence collected from earlier breaches. The same fingerprint-like coding patterns, the same style of privilege escalation, the same tunnel protocols, the same time of night. And when they cross-checked his browsing habits with logs recovered from servers, the timeline aligned too perfectly to ignore. But the teen still believed the world was clueless. He had no idea how close they were. No idea that agents sat behind screens thousands of miles away, watching him type in real time. No idea that every keystroke, every move, every login brought them closer. Hook. The only thing more dangerous than being hunted is not realizing you're the prey. The FBI's plan was simple. Push him into making one mistake that would expose his real location. That moment came late one night when he switched from his laptop to a new device, one T, properly configured for anonymity. A small misstep, a minor oversight, a single slip in routing. For 10 seconds, Justin, his signal leaked through a traceable IP address linked to the house where he lived. That was all the FBI needed. A report was drafted. A warrant request was filed. A quiet alert was sent to the field office closest to his city. And while he slept, convinced he was still a ghost in the network, agents were preparing to surround his home. But before they moved in, something unexpected happened. The teen logged into the same fake challenge network again, and this time he saw a message waiting for him from the account running the operation. Just one sentence. "You're better than most, but you're not invisible." He froze. For the first time in years, he felt fear. It was a feeling he thought he had outgrown. But that single message hit him with the weight of reality. Someone out there knew him. Someone out there was watching. Someone out there had tracked him. He immediately shut down his computer, wiped drives, and tried to destroy every trace he could. But fear leads to mistakes. Panic leads to errors. And in that nervous frenzy, he left behind a script that the FBI later described as the missing puzzle piece. He had tipped his hand, and the FBI was done waiting. Hook. What happened next was so dramatic, so unexpected, that even the agents involved still talk about it today. It was early morning when he woke up to the sound of heavy pounding on his front door. For a split second, he thought it was a neighbor or a delivery. But the moment he looked outside and saw the dark SUVs, the badges, the agents in tactical vests, reality crashed through him. It wasn't a game anymore. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't a competition for underground recognition. It was the end. The agents rushed in, shouting instructions, clearing rooms, one by one. They found him in his bedroom, frozen, hands raised, surrounded by the blinking lights of the very machines that made him feel invincible for so many years. Machines that would now become the evidence used against him. He didn't resist. He didn't argue. And perhaps for the first time in his life, it felt small. But what the FBI didn't expect, what no one expected, was what the teen said during the interrogation. He didn't blame anyone. He didn't deny anything. Instead, he said something that stunned the room. "I didn't do it for money. I did it because I wanted someone to notice." Hook. And that was the moment the FBI realized the truth. They hadn't caught a hardened criminal. They had caught a kid who just wanted to matter. From Eri. The story takes a shocking turn because what happened next transformed him from a criminal into something else entirely. The courtroom was packed, but it wasn't the kind of crowd you would expect for a teenager on trial. No parents crying in the front row. No friends whispering prayers. No classmates hoping for a miracle. Instead, the benches were filled with journalists, national security analysts, federal observers, and government lawyers who had spent years Triggenfelling. They weren't here to mourn him. They were here because this case had exposed a weakness in the very systems they believed were unbreakable. A 16-year-old had pushed the FBI into panic mode, forced the NSA to rewrite protocols, and made several federal agencies look foolish. They wanted answers. They wanted justification. And more than anything, they wanted the world to know this wasn't supposed to be possible. The teen, once arrogant, once sure of his superiority, sat silently now. No smirk, no spark of rebellion, no signs of the criminal mastermind that had once danced circles around federal investigators. For the first time in his life, he wasn't in control. And neo Italiano. He had spent years manipulating the world from behind a keyboard, years savoring the rush of being invisible, untouchable, uncatchable. But in that courtroom, he was just a kid facing a lifetime of consequences he never thought would apply to him. As the prosecutor laid out the timeline, the evidence, and the damage caused by the teen's actions, something uncomfortable began to spread through the courtroom. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was disbelief. People cooled in tea understand how a teenager with no formal training, no government backing, and no elite education managed to infiltrate systems protected by entire departments dedicated to keeping them secure. How did just a kid breach encrypted servers that cost billions to protect? How did he stay hidden for so long? How did he outsmart professionals who spent decades mastering cybersecurity? The prosecutor explained it clearly. Because he did. T thinks the same way they did, he thought, like someone who believed rules did not apply to him. And then came the moment the courtroom truly fell silent. The judge asked the teen if he had anything to say before sentencing. A teenager who had spent his entire life outplaying adults, taunting federal agents, slipping through digital cracks like S'more suddenly looked small. But his words didn't match the posture. He didn't apologize. He didn't show remorse. He didn't beg for leniency. Instead, he offered a single sentence that would later become the headline of every news outlet in the country. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to prove I was smarter than the people running this country. It was a confession and a warning at the same time. But the judge didn't flinch. He had heard confessions before, some sincere, some manipulative, some desperate. T's. One wasn't. T. Any of those. It was the kind of statement that confirmed what the government already believed. The teen was dangerous, not because of hatred or ideology, but because of his brilliance, his ego, and his belief that he could bend the world to his will. And that, in the eyes of the law, was far more dangerous than anger or violence. The judge delivered a sentence designed not only to punish, but to send a message. A message to every teenager who believed hacking was a game. A message to every digital prodigy who thought they were above consequence. A message to every agency embarrassed by how badly they had been tricked. The teen was sentenced to 12 years in a federal facility with mandatory cyber restrictions so strict that he wouldn't be allowed near a computer for years, even after his release. The courtroom reacted immediately. Gasps. Whispers. Shock. Some thought it was too harsh for someone so young. Others thought it was far too lenient for someone who had breached national security systems. But Atin himself didn't react at all. No emotion, no panic, no relief. It was almost as if he expected this outcome all along, like he knew the moment he was caught that this was the only way the story could end. But the story didn't end there, because as the news broke, as headlines rolled across screens, as social media erupted with outrage and fascination, something else began happening behind closed doors. High-level officials started asking questions not about the teen, but about themselves. If a teenager could do this, what could a foreign government do? What could an organized group accomplish? What vulnerabilities existed that they didn't even know about? And if one gifted kid could sneak through the cracks, how many others had already done it without being caught? Suddenly, the teen wasn't just a criminal. He was a wake-up call. And here's where the twist comes in, the twist that would redefine everything. 2 years into his sentence, something unexpected happened. A sealed request from a federal cybersecurity division arrived quietly at the facility. A meeting was arranged, not for leniency, not for negotiation, but for something far more controversial. The government wanted to test the teen, not with a computer, he wasn't allowed near one, but with questions, problems, and scenarios. They wanted to know if he had acted alone, or if he had knowledge that could expose even more weaknesses in the system. And they wanted to know if he could solve cybersecurity puzzles their own analysts struggled with. they discovered something terrifying. He could, even without a keyboard, even without access to the internet, even without the digital tools he once relied on, he could still think like a hacker, still see holes where others saw walls, still find paths where others saw dead ends. The conversations he had with federal analysts, conversations still classified to this day, left experts stunned, and it raised a question no one could answer. What do you do with a teenager whose mind is both a national vulnerability and a national asset? That question began a new chapter, one wrapped in secrecy, controversy, and moral complexity. The teen wasn't offered freedom, but he was offered something else. Something rarely given to someone his age, and even more rarely to someone convicted of federal side. A chance not to escape his punishment, but to redefine it. He was asked to help strengthen the same systems he once broke, to advise on vulnerabilities he exploited, to help rebuild protocols around the flaws he exposed. Some called it rehabilitation, others called it exploitation. But one thing was clear: the teen who once outsmarted the FBI would now be working for the same government he humiliated. Or so it seemed, because lurking beneath the surface of this new arrangement was a tenshina, feared that the government couldn't shake. Was he truly helping? Or was he simply waiting? Planning? Watching? Was he some kind of reformed geniusaur? A threat growing smarter in silence? Even the experts assigned to monitor him couldn't agree. The teen was unpredictable. Too intelligent to read, too calm to trust. And then, just when the government thought they finally understood him, he dropped another bombshell, another secret, another confession, another twist. A revelation that would force the FBI and NSA to rewrite the narrative of everything they thought they knew about the case. And that moment is where the final part begins. He spent years believing he was smarter than every agent, every analyst, every system designed to stop people exactly like him. But now, for the first time, the teen prodigy who once danced circles around the FBI found himself sitting in a room he could not escape. The air felt heavier, the silence colder, and the ticking of a wall clock somewhere behind him reminded him of something he had never truly faced before. Consequences, real ones. The kind you can't code your way out of. The kind you can't disguise behind a proxy or a decoy server. For the first time in his young life, he wasn't in control. And Ake knew Italiano. But what he didn't know what I couldn't have known was that the FBI had no intention of charging him like a normal cybercriminal. They had something different in mind, something he never imagined. Something that would change his future forever. 2 minutes in hook. There is an old saying in the intelligence world: if you can't stop a threat, recruit Italiano. The teen had no idea that his punishment and his opportunity were about to walk through the same door at the same time. Agents entered the interrogation room, not aggressively, not with the coldness he expected. Instead, they looked at him with something unexpected: curiosity, admiration, even. They had spent months, maybe years, trying to figure out who the ghost behind the screen really was. And now, he was just a kid sitting in a plain chair with nervous fingers tapping against the metal table. The silence broke when one agent finally said the words he never expected to hear. "We know what you've done, but we also know what you're capable of." For the first time, he raised his head. The agent continued, "You're not the first genius we've caught, but you might be one of the youngest." The message was clear. They weren't here to destroy him. They were here to control him. But before he could understand what that meant, he had to face everything he'd done. They listed his intrusions: government servers, corporate systems, encrypted networks, financial institutions, and the numbers shocked even him. Every single breach, every line of code he thought he had erased, every footprint he believed he covered. The FBI had tracked it all. 2 minutes later, hooked. Just when he thought the FBI was done revealing how much they knew, the agent placed one final document on the table, one that made the teen's heart drop. It was the breach he thought no one would ever discover. The one he believed was completely invisible. The one that, if exposed, could change how the world saw him forever. The breach wasn't an attack. It wasn't theft. It was surveillance. Months earlier, He had quietly accessed a system so secure that even federal agencies rarely touched it. He didn't steal anything. He didn't damage anything. He just watched. He studied how a certain intelligence unit operated, monitored communications, and learned the structure of the very people now interrogating him. He wasn't trying to expose them. He wasn't trying to harm them. He was testing his limits. He was testing himself, and he had passed too well. One of the agents leaned forward. "Do you understand what this means?" He didn't respond, but deep down, he knew. He had crossed a line so dangerous that if he had been even a year older, he would likely never see the outside world again. Instead, the FBI offered him something unexpected. A deal. A chance to work with them. A chance to use the same brilliance that got him arrested to stop others who were even more dangerous. He would still face consequences, supervision, limits, mandatory programs. But A. Walden TB locked away. Not if he cooperated. Not if he agreed to help. And for the first time, the kid who had spent his life thinking he didn't need anyone suddenly realized he couldn't survive without help now. 2 minutes later, Hook. But there was one problem. He didn't trust the FBI. Not yet. Not fully. And the FBI didn't trust him either. The deal could work, but only if both sides were willing to play the game honestly. The only question was, could a teen who built a world out of lies suddenly become truthful? Weeks passed. Psychologists examined him. Intelligence specialists evaluated him. Cyber experts tested him. And the more they watched him, the more one thing became clear. His talent was not learned, it was instinct. It was raw. It was something almost no one could replicate. The FBI wasn't just dealing with a hacker. They were dealing with a mind that thought differently than everyone else. He began working under heavy surveillance, inside a controlled digital sandbox, where every keystroke was monitored. At first, he resented it. He hated the limitations, hated the idea of being watched, hated the idea that he wasn't the one in control. But then something shifted. The challenges he faced inside the FBI environment were harder, more complex, more thrilling. And he found himself improving. At times, he amazed the agents. Other times, he terrified them. Because sometimes, he solved problems too quickly. Sometimes he found vulnerabilities they didn't know existed. Sometimes he looked at a massive security flaw and said, "You really didn't see that?" 2 minutes later, Hook. But there was a darker side to this new partnership. Not everyone in the FBI wanted a teen hacker involved. Some believed he was still a danger. Some believed he was manipulating the system again. And some believed he might be using his new position to hide even deeper secrets. The FBI hadn't uncovered yet. Rumors spread within the agency. Internal investigations began. A silent war formed between those who wanted him as an asset and those who wanted him gone. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening to him. For the first time in his life, he felt guilty. Not because he feared punishment, but because he realized how many people were affected by what he did. He saw victims whose money was stolen by other hackers. He saw hospitals attacked by He saw ordinary families losing everything because someone like him had breached a system for fun. For the first time, he understood the damage that people like him, people with his talent, could do. 2 minutes later, Hook. Then came the moment that changed everything. A threat emerged, a threat so dangerous that even senior FBI analysts were struggling. A foreign hacking group had breached critical US infrastructure, and the clock was ticking. Millions of people were at risk. Systems were shutting down. Agencies were scrambling, and the FBI had no choice but to turn to the teen they once hunted. He sat down at the console, breathing slowly, knowing that this time, it wasn't a game. This time, if he failed, people would get hurt. Maybe thousands, maybe millions. And as his fingers hit the keyboard, every agent in the room held their breath, because they knew something he didn't. If he succeeded, he would prove himself invaluable. And if he failed, the United States would suffer one of the worst cyber attacks in history.